Hi again then guys, and welcome to another hot button countdown in the world of Gran Turismo Sport. This is a topic which a ton of people are interested in for obvious reasons. People want to know when the new car packs are coming out, when new tracks are coming out, what new vehicles there are going to be. And this is pretty much the best time, or as good a time as any really, to look back on the cars that we've got so far. Because of course we've currently come to the end of at least the majority, if not all, of the expected DLC cars. This is far from the end though. Kaz has announced that there are plenty more coming to the game, he just hasn't specified when or what they will be. But the game is due to have in excess of 500 cars over the course of its run, so there are plenty more to come. And so now I've decided to take a look back over the ones that we currently have and which ones are the best. Because of course you don't have to buy any of them, you don't have to buy the packs, you don't have to spend real money to get them, they're just updates in the game. So which ones should you actually try to track down in the game, be it either to win and use or to buy and use? In other words, which are the best ones so far? Well, of course, best is an interesting term, that doesn't just mean fastest, so I've narrowed it down to 10 cars which I think every player on GT Sport should try out at least once. Now this list is not from best to worst, or worst to best, it's just a selection of the 10 that I would recommend. Now of course you can slap down in the comments which ones you love to use the most, and this is of course in particular just DLC cars, not the cars that were in the game from day one. So, let's get into the list. And kicking us off first of all on the list is the Supra. Now the Supra is not a car which I use a ton in the game, so that kind of raises the question of why I'm featuring it. Well, actually the answer to that is very simple: the significance of it. This is one of those occasions where Polyphony listened to the community. A number of people for a number of years have wanted a premium Supra, and although plenty of other games have already had cars with fully detailed interiors, it sometimes takes Gran Turismo a little bit longer to get around to that kind of thing. Now this is not the last time on the list we'll see a car like this, which isn't necessarily the most competitive thing around, or the most useful even, although it is useful and it is competitive. It's more so included because of its significance. It's such a fan favourite, it's finally got the full detailed treatment in HD, better sounds, more realistic performance, and of course the fully detailed interior. So this one is more so on the list because of its significance to the community. And there's one other car which I think hopefully will end up on a list like this, and that's a premium DC2 Integra, but of course that's for a future time. Next up on the list I'm putting another car which is more so here for its significance, and this one certainly hits home with me much more than the Supra does, and that is the Cobra 427. Now for those who have maybe started playing Gran Turismo in the past couple of months rather than from day one, or at least the early days, you'll probably take a car like this for granted in terms of what it meant, and the reason why I'm featuring it is because this was the first classic DLC car to be added to the game. Now we had one in the game from day one, which was the Pikes Peak Audi Quattro, but that wasn't enough. That is not an indicator that there would be more coming. This Cobra, however, gave those of us who are classic fans, definitely myself included, that hope that we were worried about, that yes indeed we would get classic cars in the game, and more so than that, they wouldn't just be dumped in their own category and become useless, but they would be useful, just like this car is in the N categories. And since then of course we've had various others, the Stingray, the Samba Bus even, and it's good to see that community being catered to within the game again. Next up I'm putting a much more recent one. This is from the very latest patch update of cars, the Honda Group 2 Super GT NSX. Now to be honest, you could put any of the three Group 2 cars in because they're all as significant as each other, but the reason why I chose the Honda, which is ironically my least favourite of the three, is because this list isn't just about me, it's about the community and the implications for it. And the strong consensus is that a lot of people in the community love the NSX. In fact, a lot of people like it the most out of the three. And personal feelings aside, what is unarguable is that all three cars are incredibly quick, and the NSX being as popular as it is, as well as being at least as quick as the other two, if not more so for many people, pretty much solidifies that it had to have a place here. Any of the three Super GT cars that we currently have are hugely useful, they're well priced, they're incredibly quick, and they're surprisingly beginner friendly. Next up on the list, I'm putting a car which again is widely loved, perhaps not quite as much as the Porsche 919 hybrid LMP car, but of course that one isn't eligible because it was already in the game from day one. This one though was added later, and it's such a useful car. The Audi R18 in its updated form, it's even better than the existing R18 TDI, which a lot of people absolutely loved on Gran Turismo 6. It happens to also be a hugely popular car on Forza as well, and you can see why. It may not have the raw numbers that many others do, at least in its stock form, but what it does have is incredible ability. This is an all-rounder in the strict sense. It's a very good endurance car, and in the real world, well, although this R18 was ultimately beaten out, you could say, by the 919s from Porsche with their dominance, Audi made a pretty strong statement as to how good their LMP cars were, and this is no different. Next up, I'm putting one which might initially seem to be kind of a strange choice, the new Alpine A110 Premier Edition. The updated car to bring Renault Alpine, or now just Alpine, into the 21st century in terms of road cars, not just their LMP machines. The reason why I'm including this one is because it's a perfect rival to stuff like the Audi TT, or even more so the Alfa Romeo 4C in the lower classes. It's not an overly powerful car, but what it can do, in a similar way to the Porsche GT3 RS, is be a true exotic, but in low classes. This car punches well above its weight, well above its power, and it's a very strong car for multiple categories, as long as you don't count in balance of performance and have free reign to do your own upgrades. Even with balance of performance, it's still good, but it's really when you have the chance to fully tune it yourself and decide what class you want to use it in that it becomes a true weapon. Next up, I'm putting one which again might not seem obvious, but this one is kind of a placeholder for a couple of different vehicles. Of course, this wasn't the first custom to be added to the game. We had the CHC Nova, which is also, of course, a muscle car underneath. Huge power, huge straight line performance. But the reason why this one for me edged out the Nova and also just got a place in my top 10 in general is because, unlike the Nova, which is a pure hot rod custom, this one manages to be just that. It's very definitely a custom. The Eckhart's Rods and Customs Mach 40 Mustang, which for those who are unfamiliar with it, is a cross between Mustang and Ford GT40, so it's lower, wider, mid-engine instead of front engine. The reason why I included this one is because it has the huge numbers of the Nova, but it's much more adept at track performance. The fact that the stance is much more similar to a supercar means that it has less body roll, it's faster through corners, and it also happens to be an outstandingly good drift car. It's so beginner friendly, so easy to use. As you can even see in this video, it's a pleasure to drift with, it's a pleasure to watch it drifting, and although it's not the cheapest thing around, it's actually not too bad. It's a lot cheaper than many of the customs that were the equivalent to this, like the Buick Special, were on previous games. Next up, we've got another car that, in a similar way to especially the Supra and even more so the Cobra, is more of a representative pick, because this is one of my favourite DLC cars so far, because I'm just a fan of the car in general, but more so because of what it represents. That's why I'm featuring it, the Ford SVT Raptor. Not only is this a car that we've never had in the franchise before, but it also, just like with the Cobra, marked the potential for more in its wake. We had no trucks, no SUVs, no crossovers, some rally cars, but that's about as close to it as we got. So this car, even if it ends up being the only truck or SUV, which I think is unlikely, it's still a good one. It's a car which can't beat a huge amount for top-end speed, but it's deceptively good around corners for lower-end classes, and the launch off the line isn't too bad either. It's easy to drive, pretty cheap as well, and it updates the lineage of trucks in the franchise, as well as indicating for those of us who are fans of bigger, heftier trucks, SUVs, crossovers, that we could get more. And for those of us who love them, myself included, that's a good sign. Next up, I'm putting another car which happens to be pretty good as a multi-purpose one. It has huge, truly huge significance for the community, even more so than the Supra, in fact, which is the nearest other thing to this car on the list in terms of why it's here, but also it's a great drifter. This is an icon of the performance world. It would have been a fantastic rival to the Mercedes 190 Evo on the older games. I still think that the 190E has a pretty decent chance of coming back as a full premium, and then all we'd need is the Sierra RS500 to complete the loop. But for now we have the BMW E30 M3, again a much more recent addition to the game, and the reason why I'm featuring it is because not just is it an effortlessly brilliant drift car, sometimes when you don't want it to be in fact, it's also an icon around the track, for good reason, but more than anything else, this was the #1 community choice. So although we're a long way from getting a number of community picks, this and the Supra in particular were those cars that the community voiced their demand and their want and their love for, and Polyphony listened. Now, although they don't do that all the time, it is nice when they do, and the E30 is a long-awaited car for the game, it's an icon, and now we finally have it. It's definitely one to check out. The pricing is unfortunate, but deserved considering it's an icon, and considering they are actually that expensive in the real world as well. My second to last pick is another one that has more resonance for me personally, in again a similar way to the Ford Raptor, and that is the Tomaso Pantera. This is a fantastic addition to the classic lineup, and also even more so than that, it's a car which represents, I would say, the Gran Turismo 4 mentality, which is my favourite of the franchise. I still believe that Gran Turismo 4 is the best game of the franchise overall, especially for its time, because it was on that game that we finally saw the return to the Gran Turismo 2 mentality of having diversity, not just in racing, but in road cars, having normal cars on the game, unique cars, quirky cars, and Gran Turismo 4 brought that back, with the likes of the three-wheel Daihatsu Midget, the Patent Motor Wagon, the Ford Model T. We saw the introduction of icons like the Pescarolo, the Minolta, the Sauber C9, and a number of others. This is that for Gran Turismo Sport. It's this token nod to a brand which doesn't need to be in the franchise. Nobody was necessarily demanding that the Pantera come to the game, but it's good to see that they haven't forgotten their roots. Is there stuff that I want to be changed about the game? For sure. This is not a free pass by any means, but it's great to see that they still value the less obvious choices for those of us who are not just classic fans, because this one happens to be a classic, but that they value diversity. That is great to see. And last but definitely not least on my list is a car which is just a simple, straight up, brilliant car that you need to own. Now, regardless of what kind of driver you are, regardless of what skill level you are at, this car is truly useful for anyone. And many of you who have followed my channel for some time know exactly why. Because put simply, this car is the best car in Gran Turismo Sport for earning money as quickly as possible. And the reason why it edges out the GT40 Mark I, which is my personal car for using money, is put simply, this is a whole lot cheaper than the GT40 and it does the same job. So it's simply a better value car, even though I personally prefer the Ford. The reason why it earns so much money can be seen from a video linked below, of course, one of my most popular videos, and for good reason, it actually works. And it's simply a good tool. This is the definition of a car that you need to own, more so than any of the others on the list. It's a car that I'm not a fan of, but it's so useful that it literally pays for itself many, many times over. But that's it for my 10 cars that I think are the absolute best of the DLC that we've got so far, and I would recommend trying out all of these. Definitely some more than others, but all of them are worth your attention. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, there is tons of other helpful stuff that you can check out on the channel, be it money tips, tuning, reviews, showdowns between rivalries, so check those out. But that's it for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.